Now, I mentioned here at the bottom, depending on the strength of a group's ethnicity, members may be pressured to make friends or have relationships only within, or I guess primarily within their group. This also happens because of the fact that people see safety and similarity. All right, so we talked a little bit in migration. Your teacher surely talked a little bit about chain migration. This idea that you might have some immigrants come from one country and land in one place in the United States, and then after sending word back home to some of their family and friends, you might see where more people move to that same community. They're not going to just land in some random place. They're going to go to where they have more of a chance through a networking of people like them. In that same way, people tend to just automatically segregate on the basis of where their interests are. You see this a lot in TV. You see this a lot in your high school cafeteria, right? Different ethnic groups, different racial groups, different sports interests, different music interests. Whenever I was in school, I played cello. I still play cello, and I would hang out in the orchestra, right? We would go and hang out in the orchestra room and practice, and just all of us music people. So you would find places where people have similar interests to you, and you hang out. All right. So I'm not saying that this is because of systemic segregation that people tend to do this, but naturally people sit where they feel more comfortable in places like cafeteria or wherever it might be. In the same way, when you look at a larger scale, people tend to form these ethnic neighborhoods, which are going to be also known as an ethnic enclave. If you're taking notes, I would write down both of these words. They mean the same thing. Okay. In fact, I think the Aaron Foberg book uses ethnic neighborhood, and just a lot of things use ethnic enclave. A political enclave is going to be like a country that's kind of off by itself, right? Or surrounded by another country, or a political unit that's surrounded by another country. So when we talk about an ethnic neighborhood or an ethnic enclave, it is literally an area within a city that contains members of the same ethnic background. And you see things like Little Italy or Little Havana or Chinatown. There are Jewish quarters in places like big cities like Boston and in New York City, where you have just nothing but Jewish people living, and you got different places like this for different ethnic groups. That's what we mean by ethnic neighborhood. So a lot of times you'll see people kind of organize themselves spatially on the basis of how they identify. Ethnicity is going to be an identity with a group who share the same culture. We've already talked about that. Race is going to be biological. Here's the thing, though. Even though we kind of looked at race as something that's socially constructed, right? Something that we kind of define what it means to us based on who all is. By the way, there was I don't know what the link. There's a YouTube video where these people talk about their ethnic identity. I would try to get it for you guys. If I don't have it tonight, I'll have it with me next time that I do a conversation. It's really cool because these people talk about their own race and ethnicity, how they identify themselves. But here's the point that I'm making, is that for it to be something that's socially constructed, distribution of persons of color matter. And it doesn't just matter to geographers, ladies and gentlemen. It matters to all of us, big time. One's skin color, one's racial skin color, that means nothing in terms of their humanity. Simply a way of human beings classifying other human beings can determine where they reside, attend school, spend their leisure time, and perform life's daily activities in some society. That's a big deal. Well, you might be thinking, I don't know if I believe that. Or I worked hard to get to where I am. Let me show you something. All right. This one here is New York City by race. Now, you can't really see the city boundaries, but what each dot represents, in this particular key, each dot represents 500 people. And look at how really segregated, for lack of a better word, the different ethnic groups are going to be. All right. Notice you got your large white groups clustered together, your large black groups clustered together, your Hispanic groups clustered together. I mean, everyone's kind of like what we were just now talking about, right? They kind of go to wherever they might feel comfortable going, or where other people like them exist and form these ethnic neighborhoods. You got the same kind of pattern in Chicago. This is a little bit more zoomed in. The scale is different. Every dot represents 200 people. You've got your black population kind of actually extending out even further. You've got whites kind of scattered out here along the outskirts, but also a large white concentration over here on the eastern end of the city, kind of northern eastern end. And then you've got your Hispanic groups kind of on each side of this wedge, if you will, of the black population. We're going to talk more about this in a minute, but, well, I won't get ahead of myself. Let's read this. My own state of South Carolina. I love South Carolina. Sense of place. Are y'all familiar with that terminology? Sense of place, not sense of plates. All right. So what I mean by this is we tend to grow associated or maybe even include within our identity the geography where we are most comfortable. That plays a lot into what I'm talking about here. I feel very, very comfortable, and I just love South Carolina. I wouldn't have it any other way. Maybe I could stay in the mountains of North Carolina because that's just beautiful. But I am all the way South Carolina. Listen to this. In my own state of South Carolina, those same counties on the low side of economic and education spectrums also have significantly higher African-American populations. Counties in the PD, Williamsburg, Lee, Marion, Marlborough, and Dillon, have both, listen to this, the lowest median incomes in the state and some of the most heavily African-American populations. Let me show you this. This map. Here's the same quote right here. I just left it in. The map is showing you the largest concentrations of African-Americans in our state. The darker the color, the larger the African-American population. So it's between 55 and 73% African-American in these counties here. And then the other, any dark blue color has a large population of African-Americans. If you look in the lighter colors, yeah, they're up to 18 to 24%. So it's a really, if you go back up here to the map I showed you a little while ago, we already know this, right? There's the majority of African Americans in our country live in the South, okay, because of a historical legacy with that. There's a lot of history in this, okay? If you look at South Carolina in and of itself, you can see that there's a lot of history in the individual places on a smaller scale for why African Americans are distributed where they are. Here's the problem. This right here is the income. The income. The lighter the color, the less money is made in these areas. Now, to be fair, South Carolina isn't like high loading it here. We're not super rich down here in South Kakalaki. In these areas, Richland, Charleston, Berkeley, Greenville, York, the median income in all these places where people are making the most money is somewhere like in the 40,000s. So we're not high rolling it here in South Carolina, and I'm cool with that. But if you look at these places down here where the highest density of African Americans live, you can definitely see that there is a correlation between income being basically poverty and the African American population in our country, in our state. Which countries are the wealthiest? We just talked about which counties. We just talked about that. So this right here is what we call the I-95 corridor. What we're looking at is the place where the majority of blacks live in the country, or in the state, is also the place that is the hardest hit economically, educationally, in terms of jobs. Look at this. This here is in 2009. This is after the Great Recession, which really hit our state hard, but hit everyone hard. You can see the places that suffered the most are going to be places right here in this I-95 corridor. President Obama, whenever he was he was running for president in 2008, before he became our president in 2008, he actually spent some time here. This region is known as the Corridor of Shame, and it's still pretty shameful how poor and how disenfranchised, more or less, this area is and the people that live there are. So you can imagine, looking back at our maps, that if this is the place where the least amount of wealth is, there's also a least amount of opportunity, meaning that if people are born in those areas, what are they destined to do? They're destined to be poor like their parents. I'm not saying that's always the case, but statistically, you can see correlations between the success of people's parents and what they have the ability to do, and with with the opportunity that exists for their kids. If you live in a place where everyone's poor and the unemployment is super high and poverty is crazy and there's no after school activities and some kids have to work instead of going to school and they have teachers that are underpaid and overworked and no resources, in some cases no textbooks, in some cases no classrooms. Yes, it's that bad. Then what do you expect? But even worse than that is that why is it almost entirely African American? And how does that correlate? It does, y'all. It does. There's a video that I put in here. Jeez. We'll come to it at some point. I'll link the video in here, like a URL that I would challenge you guys to go ahead and take a look at. We'll get to it a little bit further down when we talk about redlining, for sure. So we'll talk more about this.